I have two main topics. The first is public transport in Hamburg, and the second one is the planning process. So some insight in what we are doing when we plan new lines or when we change lines in public transport. Some words about the public transport in Hamburg. I hope you see the changing slides.
Yes.
Okay. Because I have split the screen here. I have to use the second one. We have the Hamburg Public Transport Association here in Hamburg, the HVB, and it takes care for one ticket, one tariff, and one timetable. And within the HVB, we have 23 transport companies that plan and operate different offers in public transport. Here you can see the public transport service area of Greater Hamburg. We have a population of 3.5 million people in this area. And of course, it's somehow different areas, very urban situations within Hamburg and very rural situation in the outer districts, and so we have a lot of different transport offers here in this area. What you can see here is the urban rail network in Hamburg with different lines of metro, of other rapid transit lines. They are operated by the HOCHBAHN, by the S-Bahn Hamburg, the Deutsche Bahn, and Metro, so different operators within this network. And we also have our bus network. This is just the metro bus network. In total, we have a few hundred lines, so can't display it centrally here. Here, this is the metro bus network, so the most important buses. We also have city buses, water buses, and express buses. And that's the situation we have in the HVB today. And now I want to tell you a little bit about the planning process, so what we do when we plan new lines and offers. First step are the social demographic surveys we have to do, because we have different determinants for traffic demand. We have, for example, purposes of travel, so for reside, work or education, shopping, leisure. We have to look on the spatial structures in a functional way, in a social demographic way. We have different distances, and we have urban development projects. And of course, we have traffic aspects to look at, the existing transport networks, the availability of private cars, the quality of the existing public transport offers, the travel times, the information of our customers. And I want to give you 3 examples on the next slides, how we look into these determinants. This is an example for the analysis of existing travel times. So we can display isochronous public transport travel times. Here in this example to Hamburg main station. I highlighted some areas where you can see that they are relatively close to the main station, and nevertheless they provide poor travel times. And that is the reason is that we have no railway service there, and people have to take the bus. So in these areas we have generate the need to make our networks better. Another example is the analysis of the catchment areas of stops and stations. We use geographical information systems for that. In these systems, we have the food path network, and we have the location of residents and workplaces in the city. And so we can intersect these two data to calculate the number of people living in the catchment areas of our stops and stations, existing stops and stations, as well as new planned. And in this example, you can see the blue market area. That is the benefit when we, in the case that we would build a second entrance to the metro station walkway. And so we can calculate which area we can catch in addition, and we also can calculate how many people are living in this area. The last example is this one. So we use our automatic passenger counting system to display by time and by space where our existing lines are crowded or overcrowded, so that we can see where there is a need for action to make something better. So after these analysis, we have to select the optimal transport mode for what we want to do. In general, we can use the bus system. The vehicles have a capacity of 70 to 140 passengers. We normally use the bus system for on relation with low passenger demand. It has few infrastructural needs, and in general, it is relatively cheap to install a new bus service. It's flexible and intensive, but it provides minor comfort, and it's often predisposed for disruptions as the buses share their space on the street with the private cars, and so congestions will have an influence on the quality of the bus service. The second possibility are lightweight systems. We don't have them in Hamburg. We once had a lightweight until 1978. Many other cities in Germany and Europe have these lightweight systems. It has a higher capacity. It's used on relations with the medium passenger demand. The costs depend a little bit of the degree of separation from the car traffic. So here in these two pictures, you can see example for a high level of segregation, and it's relatively fast and functional and provides good comfort. The last are other comparable transit railway systems. We can have more than 800 passengers per train. So these systems are used on relations with a very high passenger demand. It's relatively expensive, especially when we have the railways, the rails in the tunnels. It's fast, it's functional, and provides high frequencies, and it has the highest comfort. So the next step is the route determination. The example given here is the extension of the rapid transit system. So the first step is to determine districts with potential and the optimal transport mode. You can see these districts marked in yellow or orange here. And after defining these districts and defining the right transport mode, the next step is to define lines concerning the integration into the existing transportation system. And the result is what you see here. So in Hamburg, we plan a new metro line or Q5 along these districts with potential, and also a new S-Bahn line, S32, serving these districts also with high potential. For these lines, we need operating concepts for regular and disrupted situations. We make technical feasibility studies, we need financing concepts, and we have to plan the infrastructure in detail and bring it to an approval process. And the last step, of course, is construction and operation. And you can calculate with a need of time of about 10 to 15 years from the first idea to the final set in operation of such railway lines. For bus lines, of course, it's much shorter. We need less than 1 year from the first idea to the operation. Last step is proof of the concept. We do that with traffic models. In these traffic models, we split up the investigated area into traffic cells. The model that we use is about 800 traffic cells. And we determine the traffic demand in between these traffic cells. As a result, we have a matrix of 800, and we can assign this matrix to a model of the transport network, and the model does a kind of routing of the traffic demand within the network. The result is what you can see on this slide. We can display the number of passengers on each railway and bus line, and so we now advance how many people will use our newly planned and public transport options. The left side, you can see the railway network with the new line in 5 in green, so it's the difference of the users. And the right side, you can see a detail of the bus system. And last but not least, we do profitability calculations. So we have the annual costs of a project, for example, for the depreciation, for infrastructure, for maintenance, for operation, and we have also benefits of the project. We have short travel times, less energy consumption and pollution, decreases of car traffic and incidental costs, and all these costs and benefits are calculated in money, and then they are compared. And in the best case, we have more benefits than costs for such a project, and this is also required for financial support of such a project by the federal government. You might know that building a new metro line is very, very expensive, and so we need this federal government money to have the chance to build such a new infrastructure here in Hamburg. Okay, that was it, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
I just have a small question just on the CVA analysis, on the cost-benefit analysis.
Question, like when you talked about the transport modes, everything, and often, I think for German cities that there's been the discussion about like building a Seilbahn. What is your opinion about that?
It was discussed in Hamburg some years before. It was planned such a Seilbahn, I don't know the right translation at the moment, from St. Pauli to the musical locations in the harbor, and the population was asked about this project idea, and a majority didn't want to have that, which has to do with this high masts you have to build, and nobody wanted to have, the majority of people didn't want to have this infrastructure in the city.
I have a question. I have a question on the last slide. The CBA analysis, cost-benefit analysis, which you use for federal money for the Bundesverkehrswegeplan, or you need. You mentioned. Would you also do such a cost-benefit analysis for an individual bus line, or only for these big investments like a metro line?
In this deep state, should we also do it for the metro lines? But of course, we also calculate cost and benefits for bus lines, but not in this.
Not in this definition.
The German one is standardisierte Bewertung.
Yeah.
Standardized evaluation, and for bus lines, we make it in a more easy way.
Simpler, makes sense.
Simple.
Now and then I have a question on the when you model it, the impact of a new bus line with the transport model. We could talk about like how you model different things, but the question for me is like if you compare the results from this transport model to the outcomes a year later, do you do that? And how different are then the outcomes, the impact that you would have in real life compared to this model? I'm a transport modeler, that's why I'm asking.
Of course, it's just a model. These models are very sensitive to travel times.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, people choose their modes of transport not only by the travel times, but also by other reasons. So it's not exactly what we don't measure exactly what we calculated, but the dimension
it's more or less right. And then
it's not right.
And then what you mentioned probably like that's due to the model that probably is very sensitive to time, but doesn't include other regions or other reasons. So it would need a more complex model to map like behavior of the consumers to have these reactions, right? And also like to differ between short term and long term. So this like depends a lot on the complexity of the model, which is highly complex enough by like mapping such a complex networks and this like size. And well, probably the behavior is a difficult part always in modeling, right? of the people. Right?
Of course, yes. But we are at the moment we're satisfied with this kind of model we have.
Yeah. I have another question on the link between your analysis. So you do the analysis of the current state. You showed the travel time analysis, or the counting in the system, the automatic counting, and then you jumped to more or less the planning in like scenarios of lines. In between, what is the format or the requirement list that comes out of the analysis of the current system? Is there like a need list or a requirement list that you generate each year out of your analysis of like strengths and weaknesses of the current system? and then you say, well, we make a priority list, and then we say, okay, now we address these first, like these yellow dots, right, where you say, here, these are our potential areas where we have like a poor serving or service level.
Yes, of course. So the main output of these analysis are these districts with potential. And of course, we also we do both analyzing districts or potentials for the railway system as well as for the bus system.
And how do you prioritize? Is there like a formal prioritization of this, of these? Because you can't like do everything at the same time, right? You have to say, well, let's start with the biggest problems for the moment. And how do you? Is there a formal way to do it, or is it up to you to decide on that based on experience?
We discuss this every 2 weeks with the HGV. And with the other transport companies. And so normally with a common sense of on the priorities yes.
Yeah. Because in the I'm asking for, because in the Bundesverkehrswegeplan, well, that's a huge issue. Like if you have like many parties that would like to get funding, and then you need like a standardized methodology to calculate these cost and benefits, as you showed later, to then decide which project would be prioritized and which not. While within a company or within a region here like HOCHBAHN, probably it's much more informal, that you would like decide together. Well, you see it, right, and you say, well, this is what you target first, this is what you target second. You don't need a like formal prioritization somehow, right? Just wait, when we come to Christoph, that's probably a big thing to think about, how this develops, right, and which problems you address first. And here also it's the organization that decides, right, on where the consumer has a problem, right? It's not, and it's a central decision.
I would have a question, Ola. To what extent do you use big data, or let's say, or use that data within your planning? Is there a team of data scientists who's working, then analyzing as well big data, like data you're collecting from phones or anything else?
So in these traffic models, we have big databases. It's mainly based on the surveys in our network where customers are asked about their needs. But we fill that up, for example, with our automatic counting data and also with telephone data. But the use of this cell phone data is just at the beginning at the moment in our company. So we are actually trying to find ways to integrate these cell phone data.
Okay, cool, interesting, because it's the only data we have. That you see it in my presentation, so we can learn from each other.
I have a last question for perhaps, and on the analysis of the travel time analysis. There were a very nice picture with the shape. Just for my students to confirm this, the generation of such a map, for the generation of such a map, how would you generate it?
This is generated in the traffic model software PTV, because you need the lines and the timetables to calculate the travel times. And we have these into our traffic model.
Basically, you do a shortest path search on a multi-model network.
Yes, it is a single model network plus the public transport offers.
Yeah, but it's not just the shortest path on the network. It's more complicated because it's a scheduled transport. Right? You need the timetables for that. But basically, right, this is the shortest possible travel time between two locations, or between one location and the main station, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just because we work on like the shortest path algorithm, and that's how they can connect it. Cool. Thanks a lot. Are there any other questions from other parties, students? For the moment? Nope, I don't hear. So in this case, we would move on to Christoph. Yeah, exactly. Now I will turn off the mic again and let you present, Christoph.
Thank you very much for inviting. Thank you, Ola, for presenting how things work or how transport lines are worked out at that in Hamburg. That's really interesting for me. For one reason, because I live in Hamburg, and I'm really hoping for you four going to my home place, WhereIsMyTransport. And the other reason is that we as Trufi are working in development countries on informal transport, which is totally different. So maybe you can just count the differences. I guess it's around 1,000 that we will find now when we talk about countries in Middle, South America, Africa, East Asia. My name is Christoph. I represent the Trufi Association. Trufi Association is an international NGO that is digitizing public transport. You might wonder, why is this person living in Hamburg? So I'm not always living in Hamburg. I also lived in Bolivia, in South America. And that is a bit where the connection came from, developing services, products for informal transport. And now we are operating in much more countries. Why? Because informal transport is not only a Bolivian phenomenon, but this is like present in most countries of the world.
Yeah, yeah. Christoph, you are muted at the moment.
Since when am I muted?
When you left your first slide.
Okay.
So
I don't start from the scratch again. That's good.
Yeah, so you can start off with what's informal transport.
Excellent, thank you. So what is informal transport? In comparison to formal transport, like in Hamburg and like most of the transports in Europe, in the US, in Asia as well, in richer cities. So informal transport is characterized by not having official stops and no schedules, no documentation of bus lines, which basically means that people just know where the buses are. If you don't know where the buses go, you just ask someone, maybe the driver, the passenger, and she will help you. Of course, they have limited knowledge, but people quite know by heart lots of parts of their daily life at least. And then you don't have to go to an official stop or something. It will not exist, but you rather would like reach out with your hand and give a sign to the driver and just stop everywhere along this line. And there's no schedules, so buses are just leaving. Maybe they leave when they are full on their initial stop, or they leave every 2 minutes. So that's quite different. It depends from bus to bus.
and so you cannot rely on time, etc. The reason behind this is totally decentralized, not centralized, decentralized. So there's no official transport network, but the operators are privately organized, and they themselves are negotiating where they go. Often there are associations of these operators, which are then discussing together with the city authorities where to go. But very typically, the transport operators have very strong power, and the city cannot just demand things or could be in control of things. So for you, depending where you're from, this might sound a bit awkward, but things, not everything is like bad, not at all. So I really like informal transport. I enjoy living in Bolivia because of maybe two things. If you think about transport there, what is really good is you have usually a very fast ride. So you don't have to look at the schedule. You just go to the street, and usually in regular times you can rely on that in 2 to 10 minutes you'll be picked up, and you just go your way. So usually it's not long waiting, and it's very fast. If traffic is smooth, it does not need to wait anywhere, because the bus would only would only stop for people that want to hop on or hop off. So no need to work to follow a schedule and these kind of things. So that's a very efficient thing about it. Of course, there are also some things which I don't like, or which people don't like on informal transport. They're often jammed during rush hours because everyone's just working for their own pocket. Everyone's paid directly by the user, by the passenger. So they don't maybe care for jams. They just go all the time. So that makes it very difficult sometimes to get transport during rush hours. Then there, on the other side, in uncontracted times like nights, we have very few buses because the driver doesn't have the incentive to go. And of course, no centralized planning is possible, not on lines like bus lines, but also like if you think about COVID rules, if you think about maybe saving CO2, having a more modern fleet. So all these things cannot be done because the operators, the streets belong to the operators. And then of course mass mobility service is difficult to implement, which means you cannot buy data because there's no central place. The drivers pay. So data is not possible. Payment with a mobile phone is more difficult because it's micro payment for one person. That's the contrast. And also the reasons why many cities out there right now, development countries, are really thinking about how can we improve our informal transport, how can we make it better without really losing the benefits of what we have right now. I'd like to step back for 2-3 minutes. What is Trufi Association at all? After I told you what informal transport is, so what are we doing? Why are we doing this? As I've said, we are non-profits, public transport. Officially registered in Hamburg, but working internationally. So we are right now 80 people worldwide in very different communities in 35 countries. Most of them are African and South American, and some are Asian. We started 2.5 years ago, with our first product, the Trufi app, that I will explain in a second. But our whole mission, or let's go to the vision, is that people in all countries, so not only we in Europe or US, but also like all development, so everywhere, would really know their best public transport option at any time. So Olaf, what is up to say is we are doing the HOCHBAHN app for development countries, which which describes the vision that we really want to give the best options right now. Because in the future, we want to know where are all buses and all these kind of things. And does the bus have space? Which is always a big topic in informal transport. You have to, the bus has space for it. Good, so that's us. We have a global team with local communities. That's very important. We really need local people. At least two of them are listening right now. Alex and David, I saw you participate this. So people are from everywhere, and this is really what we need. Transport experts, developers, community managers. And if you are interested in working with us, please write me up. Because we are looking for more and more people to join us. For extension, we started in HOCHBAHN and then have launched Trufi apps right now to Internal, Accra, and Addis Ababa. There are some pilots running, and we are discussing with other cities right now about bringing Trufi there. So what does the app do? Just that you know, on the left picture you see a very typical screen, like I'm going from A to B, and there's the result. That's very obvious. It's a journey planner. So what's special about this journey planner? Of course, it can handle informal transport, which means it does not need any stops. You can hop on, hop off everywhere along the line. Integration of very, very different schedules and bus lines is also a key difference, I would say. I will show on a later slide now from which different sources we get schedules. Or not schedules, but like bus lines. Another special thing is that it's open source and uses open data. So all the bus lines that we create and then we change are OpenStreetMap, and our code is open on GitHub. That also means it's not a journey planner where you add different cities. It's a journey planner explicitly for a city. So there's a Trufi app in HOCHBAHN, there's Trufi app in Accra, there's Chalo app in Accra, there's Busboy in Uitama, Manila would have no set up. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Alex, you know best, you're from Manila. So from Manila, it would be Jeepney app. So it's white label, it can be copy pasted to any city, and we work both with communities that do all the work by themselves, and we just help them with documentations. And there are also cities that we help to roll out Trufi to their city. So they're also like this community work where people do it on their own, and then we also help cities that funded by development works. And by the way, this is the first open source trip planner ever released in the Apple Store worldwide. That was a very nice surprise. We didn't know that this had existed before. Okay. So just very roughly what would we do there? Trufi app, of course, that's like for the users to know how to get from A to B. We have a driver app so that the driver can also check the route if he's going a new route. That was also made during COVID times in the hackathon because we want to tell us when this bus is full. And full could also mean half full because there's a restriction because of COVID on how many people could enter the bus. So we want to give this information for the city, like how full is your public transport, but also to the user when is the next free bus coming up. We have a dashboard for cities where they, for example, see which searches lead to bad results. We have a dashboard for operators where they see where are my buses, and some other tools for transit data and documentation methods. So back to our topic. So who's planning informal transport lines? The city, no. So the city always like, or like I'm of course, but like it's not black and white, but usually the the city. In most of the places we work with, the city cannot really do anything about it because they are not in control of the streets, as I've said before. They can only negotiate and give incentives. But regional and informal transport operators are planning the lines. So there are constant negotiations on bus lines, like attractive streets. Operators want to change to different streets, and then you see what I've just pasted in on the right side. You see bloqueos in Bolivia, for example, so traffic jams. So very often operators are blocking other operators because they don't like that they change their route, that they go for different streets because it's their street, and maybe they catch some messages from them. So that's just reality. If it's not a centralized approach, if it's operator or the drivers pay directly, they themselves negotiate on the bus lines. There are really fights for streets, and operators in many countries have a bit of a mafia structure as well, to be honest. Yeah, but good things, new lines will pop up when drivers see a demand. So that's also a good thing that might happen. And in the end, I would call this a bottom-up plan. Because it's not like top to bottom, where the city thinks, okay, where something needed. It's really like having a decentralized bottom-up. Because just people, the drivers, the operators, are just looking on the demand of the users. So can a city plan public transport lines at all? That's then maybe the question that might come up. And this is a very good question. I saw Mark Hasselberger in the audience, and maybe some others of you as well think about that. Like, what can the city do? So we as Trufi, we can just deliver free requisites on what, so that the city can plan it. But still, we'll talk about these three things that we can help with. But then the whole planning themselves and also give incentives, that's a very political thing to do. It means talking with many parties and giving very good incentives. So that's out of our scope as public association. But what we can do, and that's one very important for public transport planners, is we can provide the data which is needed to see where public transport needs to be improved, where lines need to be changed, where lines need to be added. These three things, the documentation of bus lines, the collection of network usage, collection of user demand. The first thing might surprise you, but these bus lines usually do not have documented bus lines. It's informal transport. People just know that when we talk to La Paz, for example, they just gave us parts of it, the gondola, which we didn't build in Hamburg. It was documented on the street that Weinabus, a local operator who Trufi, Google My Maps, Google Katari, Arctis. So we got different sources that we could combine. We can combine them. Of course, our app is multimodal, but it shows that things are just documented in different areas. We try to bring them all together in OpenStreetMap. So that is why we also train communities how to use open data tools and how to then, because we want to combine them in this central place. No, if you might wonder, Google Maps does not have the data. So I think there are very few cities in development countries where Google Maps do know the data because it's not so attractive for them. I think, and it's very difficult for them as well, like it is difficult for us. So our approach is really training local communities, open data enthusiasts, to crowdsourcing and put the lines, document the lines in OpenStreetMap. And that's a very, very important part of our work. As you can see, HOCHBAHN, for example, is very well documented right now the public transport lines, and that has been the tedious work of several years. But that is the basic that you can do any planning at all. You have to know that. You have to know all of that, the different types of transport. The next thing we can provide for where we can help is collecting the network usage. So that's why I was asking before. So we, the user can accept to share his data, raw data, so that we know where they are going. By the way, we also use this to improve the documentation of networks if a bus line is changing or is missing. But also we know where's the network usage, where's the full, where are many people going, which are the frequently used lines, and including the driver, when you can say that is full. And the other thing is the user demand, which is which is very interesting, where we have where you can make analysis on the searches. You can really look what kind of search leads to a bad result. And when you do this, you know what parts of the cities are not well connected. And I think this is, for example, just this one question would make such a difference to connect parts of the cities better with each other than they are. So to sum up, I would say yes, the city can plan public transport. They need documentation. They need to know the usage. And then actually you can do the same things. Like I would say, like the Worldwide does, the very advanced things they could do as well. They just need this data, and then to just give the full picture. There's a big but, because of course all these kind of changes. It's not like in Hamburg where then we just say, okay, let's go with U4 to Hamburg or something. Maybe the voting. That's difficult as well, because maybe you need a voting or something else and lots of planning. But in this case here, you really have to talk to so many different actors and give so many good incentives, because it's automatic that you want to switch. So that's just really difficult on many different aspects. Cool. I hope I could explain it on planning, on us on planning. So I'm open for your questions. And I'm sorry that it's already quite late. Hello, do you want to take over?
Yeah, please. So I have a ton of questions. Is there someone else who wants to ask first? If not, I'm going to ask. So there's more one pushing. So from my side, like, where I see a big difference, obviously, is in planning. While in Hamburg, the supply side is pretty clear, because that's what HOCHBAHN or like Hamburg decides. In your case, the supply sides need or data on the supply side need to be collected, right? So it's not so easy to see where these bus lines are in the first place, right? So that's, and then on the other hand, so the data on the supply side, there's a big advantage on the central planning side. But now on the demand side, I somehow had the impression that you have like an advantage here. Like the question for you is like, how is it with data privacy? Because I imagine like for Hamburg, having like individual user data and storing it is problematic. While you said, well, as soon as they agree in the app, we use this data for analysis.
Yeah, that's true. So obviously, in the places where we work, there's no DSGVO or European things, so I guess we could do whatever we want. But we just ask the user to accept. And we really need this data, so it's very obvious. So people are very willing to share their data because they are so happy about getting these opportunities to the app, and they know that they have to help to make the app better. Because if they don't help, no one else will help.
Also, a question on the data points. You track the drivers, right? As I understood. So to see when the next bus will come and like how full he is, for the consumer, you will have to collect the data from the driver where he is, where he travels, how fast, how much people he has in the bus. So that's also a data point which is probably interesting, right? So collecting. But who makes the entry? How many people are on the bus? So you can easily track the bus, but how many people are on the bus? It's not so easy.
No, that's impossible. It's impossible. Let's say it's impossible right now. It will get much more possible when like payment is done over the app, for example. The driver is paid by the user, then you can count.
Then you can see.
We need field studies. So the driver is on his own. He's driving, he's looking for passengers, he's collecting money, and so the drivers were always possible. Like in the first 10 minutes, they added and removed passengers in the app, but after that, it is just not possible because they are so busy. Okay. So we only have very full and not full button.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the end, for the user, the most important thing is. Does the next bus have space?
Yeah.
So that's answered. And for the city, we need to tell the city how full is your network. Or during COVID times, we also told the user, like your public transport network seems to be very full. Please go 2 hours later if you can. So therefore, we just need. It would be perfect to have a concrete number of seats, but it already helps if we see that 10% are full.
Yeah. Now, another question on the lines, on the bus lines, how does it work? Because I want to be sure that my bus line is always the same line, and when I am on the bus, or when I go out for catching the bus, who punishes the driver that he doesn't follow the line? So there might be, because he might see that there's some more demand in another area. So what makes them to stay on his bus line?
So it's just the control between the operators. So if you don't stick to your rule, you won't get in fights with other operators. But you're saying with your own passengers.
And also what I would like to have on the bus line is that also in off-peak times there's enough capacity, like in the night or in the evening. Is there a mechanism that guarantees that or that pushes for that?
So there are tents. Also the city we primarily work with, HOCHBAHN, they're also tents. So the city tries to enforce a minimum offer.
Mm-hmm.
However, it doesn't seem to work all the time. So, for example, in the past, one of the first requirements of the app was that the user could say, no bus is coming, and waiting for so many minutes, no bus is coming. Or the bus catched me up, but the bus driver forced me to leave before the final stop.
Yeah.
So we also try to get just like this into the app to improve the situation and make it more transparent.
Okay. Yeah. Now, another idea that I had, or like the problem in these kind of transport, as long as you live and work along a certain bus line where many people travel, the system is fine. And as you said, perhaps even faster, right? But as soon as you would want to go to destinations that are not well served, where you have to change the lines to get there, this gets very problematic. Right, so there's no network in this sense. There's only a line. Or is there crossings where you say, well, this is a crossing point where two lines cross. That's why we all stop here.
So there are many crossings because wherever two lines just meet each other, you can hop on or off from one and hop on to the other. So it's very normal to use two different buses on the way to work or to somewhere else. But that's really one of the drawbacks, because the people usually usually know the bus lines they use every day. But if you go to a new part of the city, then you're often lost, and also the driver does not know because he has never been in that part of the city. So that makes the whole system like this non-transparency, the non-documentation of lines makes it then very inefficient.
Why with your app, you can at least address this a little bit, because if all lines are in your app, you see which lines you can use.
Yes, definitely. So when I was there last year, a friend visited me, and whenever someone just had the relaunch of the app, and whenever someone visited me, I just asked, what Trufi did you take? And then, I took first this to the center, and then the other to come to your home.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, oh wait, there's another Trufi which just brings you directly there. And then you save half of the costs and time, but you just have to walk back 3 streets. And then, I didn't know that. Of course, how could you? I mean, there are like 500 lines, so the app really helps there.
Yeah. And then I had another question I was working a lot in Vietnam for some time, and then there, while you would like probably categorize it as a developing country, but the public administration is much stronger, and they have like public bus lines. So is there a point in the development of the country where this planning gets formalized and taken over by public administration? So that does it reflect a certain stage of development of the country? What I mean, Vietnam already has a public transport system.
Yes.
But
so I think there's a development. So the informal transport I talked about, like very black white in it, is totally bottom up, decentralized. The operators negotiate on the routes.
Yeah.
There's also semi-formal transport where you have, for example, a modern metro. Or a light railway or something else, and then you call like the auto line of bus, and then you combine it with the informal sector.
Yeah.
So that's called semi-formal transport, which is I guess that's actually the most common kind of transport in cities above 100,000 people. And I think there's the development to a formal transport where people really want to make step by step a bit better, get the city more in control, giving good incentives to the operators and drivers to commit themselves to specific rules and behaviors. And I would say, that you can see the development of the country in its public sector.
And probably also what you just said, there's a threshold of a certain size of a city, right? So if you reach a certain size of city, then the public administration is big enough to afford a central planning or a public transport system. Like the development of the country and size of the city.
Yes, definitely. And access to development money, because most of these countries
they get
couldn't pay it. So luckily we have development organizations like AFD, GIZ, that support this kind of issues. Because in the end, we say if public transport is strong, people buy their own cars, so it's good for the climate, it's good for society, etc.
And I would like to ask one question also to Mr. Weinrich. Now, when you see this the potential here on the user side, the data on the user side. So they are collecting in their app the user behavior, which you can do as well as HOCHBAHN, of course, in your app. Unfortunately, most people don't use the HOCHBAHN app but Google Maps. Is there a pushback of data from Google Maps to the HOCHBAHN for planning? A pushback in terms of data, not money.
No, it isn't. And the only data we use at the moment from the app is the data of the routing.
Routing on the network.
So to say, so when people use the app, if you app and ask the app which is the best way to go from A to B,
yeah,
then you get this data.
Yeah, but you don't track user data with the app.
Of course not.
Why you say of course? Because of the data issues. But if I would accept it in the app that my data would be used, this would be, well, still it's personal data, right? Because so you could track the person probably with this data.
But that never was an idea to do that. So we are trying some other ways to make our data better. For example, with the help of this new automatic paying systems. There are some approaches where we look at the dealer networks, the stop stations, how we can maybe track, but always, of course, in an anonymous way.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing not to collect any personal data from our customers.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Any other questions from the audience on Trufi or Hamburg? They're getting more and more tired. Unfortunately, they don't have their cameras on. I couldn't see. Okay. Cool. So thanks a lot again, Christoph and Savainik, for this insightful presentations. This is great for me, at least. I hope it was fun for you as well a little bit. Yeah, thanks again and see you soon.
Thanks to you, Hanno. It was a pleasure to talk and discuss and see all of what you're doing as well.
Cool.
So, of course, we can go on with this discussions in the future.
Cool. I will invite you again, hopefully soon. Okay, so good talk. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.